Okay, we're back and we're going to continue looking at the creation week that is found in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. And last time we talked about Genesis being a time of beginnings. And so we're going to be introducing a lot of different themes. And last time we talked about light and darkness being divided, and that we have a choice then to walk either in the darkness or in the light. And so that's what this Bible study is really about, is to bring light to your understanding. We talked about the gospel. The reason we went there first was so that we can paint a picture. It's a lot easier to remember a picture than it is to remember words. In fact, the old expression, one picture is worth 1,000 words. And so if we can start to put these concepts in picture form into our minds. And so what was the picture? The picture was the death on the cross, the burial in the tomb, and the resurrection back to life out of that tomb. And even as that happens, we see that our imaginations almost automatically put light and darkness into that picture, the darkness of the tomb, the light that came when the resurrection happened. And so we, again, have darkness and we have light, and there's a division between those two things. Sometimes we're in a place where it's not clearly light or dark, and we can call that dusk as far as the day is concerned, or we can call it dawn. Either one, but it's a place of transition. And it might be that that's where you're at right now, that you want to transition from the way life has been going into something better. And so there's going to be this area that's going to happen that will cause the light to begin to push aside the darkness, but it doesn't happen all at once. And so that's why we have the flip chart, so that we can allow that transition to take place on a regular basis, so that we're not just trying to do something all at once, so that we can digest the scriptures, understand them, apply them, and visualize them. And so we use the chart. I teach from the chart. I just look at this. And it's a lot easier to visualize than it is to memorize. Memorization, of course, is good, but we don't need to go there right now. And so we're going to move on to the next day. I believe we started with verse 3 and read this first day's account. But I'm going to start over again in this lesson with verse 3 of chapter 1 of Genesis. And God said, "Let there be light." And so he spoke, and there was light. What he says becomes. If he says, "Let there be light," there's going to be light. I want to get into that, but I'm going to move on instead. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And that's the division that we're talking about. He divided the light from the darkness. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So the day is finished, and what started off in total darkness now has both light and darkness. And there's a division between the two. You can't have both. You can have that transition that we're talking about, but you can't have full light and full darkness at the same time. And we could say, well, which is more powerful? And that's obvious, that when there's darkness, it means there's no light. But when the light comes into the darkness disappears. So the more powerful of the two is light. So when we get into the scriptures, into the word, we're going to find out the word is powerful, and it dispels the darkness that looms so often, too often, because of sin in our lives. And God wants to take care of that for you and give you a better life. Okay, now there's a principle that's happening. That's what I said. There's going to be a lot of things introduced to us here. But the principle that we see on the first day is that that God is going to order this chaotic world by divisions. All right, and you say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, he divided the light from the darkness, didn't he? So he put a division there. He separates one thing from another. I don't know. We're living in a world that doesn't like separation so much. I think a world that doesn't want to see things clearly. It wants to, if I could say it, remain in that chaotic condition. But that's not what this is about. This is about clarity. This is about opening our understanding to what God has done in order to order this world and subsequently order our lives. Okay, and so divisions is the means, if I could say that, of order. And then you say, well, what do you mean by that? If you had a pocket full of coins and you pulled them out, maybe there's 50 coins in your pocket. That's, I suppose, quite a bit, more than I have, I know. And you laid them out on the table and just let them drop. It would be easy to see that that's a chaotic condition. You've got pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, maybe even a 50-cent piece. Or if you're really, really fortunate, you might have a silver dollar. But they're all in a jumble. They're all in a mess. And the way that you're going to bring order to those coins, in fact, if you take them to the bank and just dump it out, they may not appreciate it so much. When you bring those coins to the bank to deposit that amount into your account, they're going to require order, aren't they? They're going to require that all the pennies are together, and they're going to require that all the nickels and the dimes and the quarters and so on. They're going to require them perhaps to be wrapped. This is old time. I don't know how it happens anymore. I haven't done this so long. But they're going to require there to be so many pennies in each wrapper and so many nickels, dimes, quarters, half dollars, all of that. And so how do we bring order to the chaos? We divided the pennies from the nickels and the nickels from the dimes, and you get the picture. And then we numbered the amounts. And so if there were 100 pennies, we divided 50 from 50. I don't want to overdo this, but I want you to understand that division is how you order things. Think of a pile of papers on somebody's desk, a big stack of papers, and they're just laying there from the day's work. And I know we have computers, and that's not so typical anymore, but I guess I'm just declaring my age here. But when you go to order those papers, what you're going to do is you're going to pick it up, and you're going to find a place to put it in what we call the filing cabinet. And filing cabinets are nothing more than spaces of division. A file is a divided area, a divided location, separate from everything else, so that you can place a certain thing that makes sense to go into that particular folder. Okay, so again, I know I'm taking a little time on this, but it's important because as we move through these days, we're going to find out that God indeed uses division to order the world. And so we go to the second day, which is the day, let's read it. And this is going to come from the 6th verse. It says, "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. And let it," what? "Divide the waters from the waters." So now we see he divided light from darkness. Now he's dividing waters from the waters. And so what's that about? The waters, well, let's read it, continue first, and then we'll explain that. "And God said, let there be a firmament," which is an atmosphere, a space, an air space, okay? A firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. So he's speaking of two different waters. I think we can understand the one water better than the other because it's the ocean. We know the world was covered with water, but there is not just liquid water there, but there's also a vapor water. And so the world would have been an ocean covered in clouds. That's not so hard to understand. And God says, it's going to be hard for me to order this world if the cloud is sitting right on top of the water. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do this. And so I'm going to read again. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, or between the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and it divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And so he puts a division between the waters. Now the whole world's covered with water, but before he does anything else, he gives us some space. First, he gives light to work with. Second, he gives space to work with. And he calls that firmament, that atmosphere, he calls heaven. There's three different heavens. Well, the heaven that he's talking about is just the air around us. It's that atmosphere between the surface of the earth, which at that time was covered with water entirely, and the clouds, which are the vapor waters. Okay, gotta be careful how much I go into, because the situation at the time was a little different than we know it today, as the cloud was a continuous cloud that covered the whole earth. So the blue skies weren't actually showing up yet, but we'll get into that, especially when we study Noah. And so we have this space that God calls heaven, and it divides the ocean from the clouds. I'll just make it that simple. And so that's the world we live in. That's what we see through. It's the air that we breathe. And so this is a requirement for order. So we have light is a requirement for order, and that space is a requirement for order. And both of those come through the process of division. He divides the light from the darkness. He divides the upper waters from the lower waters. So now we have a place to live, and he has a place to work, because now he's going to start doing some other things. And we're not going to get into that right now. We'll continue this page. It's going to take another lesson or two before we get through it, because we are being introduced to so many new things, and we don't want to just skip over them. Appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope this is beneficial. I think you'll learn some things, and it's our privilege to bring it to you. God bless.